You guys are listening to the Modern Craftsman podcast, and today you had on me, Jake Chicoine,
Ben Chicoine,
and Karina Chicoine.
You're here to learn about mass timber, education, homeschooling,
running across 2 countries,
running a business as a family.
It's a pretty wide-ranging topic, conversation, and I hope you guys enjoy it, and thanks for having us.
Cool.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hello.
What's going on?
Not too much.
It's another day.
Yeah.
We kicked everybody out of our office so we can have a chat with you guys.
Yeah, excited to be here. It's really awesome for us.
It's a bit of a one-way friendship. We're big fans of the show.
That is
Nice to officially meet you guys.
That is incorrect. The friendship is both ways, and you guys do some pretty incredible work. I don't know who runs the Instagram.
It's a bit of myself and my wife, who does a lot of our HR and marketing.
All right. Were you the wise ass that when I asked the question, you said, maybe I'll answer you if I can come on the podcast? Okay. I was like, well done, Tyler. I reached out. I was like, hey, can you give me some feedback on some CLTs? I'm thinking about using it. He goes, maybe if you had me on the podcast, I can tell you about it. And I was like, well done.
Guess it worked. The one shitty thing about having 3 people on is now we don't have everyone's name right there. So you guys are gonna have to give me names.
Absolutely. So myself, it's Jake Chicoine. I am the second youngest of the 6 of us.
Yeah, orally. I'm Ben, and so Jake and I are the ones who founded it. Founded MCH 10 years ago. It's our 10-year anniversary, and then Karina joined us
6 years ago now.
6 years ago.
I got them all shaped up.
Karina, like the Bob Dylan song, or different spelling?
Different spelling, but sounds the same.
Homophone.
Tyler, this is the second podcast you brought up a song that I don't know.
Karina, it's a Bob Dylan song.
Yeah.
That's CORR maybe?
RRINA, yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's also a movie.
Is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Whoopi Goldberg is in it.
I should have known. She's my favorite actress of all time. I loved her in The Little Rascals.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
I feel like that's the only movie I know that she was
Sister
in.
Act?
And then it was didn't see that.
Oh, you're missing out.
And then it was Hollywood Squares. I remember my grandmother watching Hollywood Squares, and Whoopi would always be in the middle.
I wasn't a big Hollywood Squares fan, or really a big Whoopi fan, but
I just knew that movie because it was my name.
Oh yeah,
people used to sing that song to me all the time growing up. So
yeah, I feel like most people don't know the song, especially not our age. But if it was your name, you would know the song.
It was definitely all the parents, so not other people, not peers.
For sure. Well, if you don't know it, it's a good song. I mean, it'd be better if they spelled it the way you spell it, but it's still a good song.
For sure. Yeah.
So 10 years ago, you guys founded the company. Well, I'm guessing it was much different than it is today.
Correct. It's the same story, construction story you'll hear. So we started out doing decks or small renovations, and slowly worked our way up to where we are today. But I think a big decision and a big move that we did, I guess it was 4 years ago now?
2019,
where we decided to do a reset in our company. Based on our values, and we were working with a coach, and we just realized that, we really wanted to take our company somewhere in a different direction. So we, took the time to, do a whole restructure within the company. And basically start from back when we were at 15 employees, went down to like 4 or 5, and then spent the past 3-4 years coming back to where we are now, doing what we really want to do. So,
which is mass timber construction.
Mass timber, right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that in so many different ways. Karina, did you join as an owner 4 years ago, or when you first came on 6 years ago?
It was 6 years ago. I worked with them for about 6 months, basically for free because they couldn't afford it, and then so that was sort of my buy-in at that point. They offered me some ownership, and then so I worked with them for 2 years, and then we restructured at that point.
And you said you work with a coach. So what was that like? Who drove that decision to work with a coach, and what was their primary goal for you guys?
Wow, that's a good question. How did that come about? We were in doing this seminar for a weekend, and she was in the same group as us. And so she wanted to meet with us after the fact to just present what she did as a business coach. And so we decided that the three of us that we should try it out. And then we ended up staying with it for about 2 years or so. And then it basically boiled down to just being someone who was just holding us accountable. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, we were getting as much value out of it. So we kind of made the choice to just hold each other accountable in some sort. And then,
it was really good for us to really set our vision, mission, values. Like we didn't have any of that in place, like just even HR, even a few different things. It's like, it really helped us structure, a few different things that we didn't have in place.
Yeah, at the time it was immensely valuable.
Yeah. Jake's wife does a really good job of holding us accountable as well. So we also have that in-house.
I mean, accountability is so huge, and that's and people, oftentimes ask me, it's like, hey, I know you've worked with a coach. Would you recommend that I work with a coach? And, I always say yes. And it's, I forget who it was on this podcast, but they were talking about how the best athletes in the world have coaches. So no matter how good you think you are at what you do, it doesn't mean you don't need a coach. A coach is designed to keep you sharp and keep you, moving forward. But what you said about accountability, that's what makes a coach good. Of course, like their experience in the industry, or maybe they don't have any experience in the industry, but they have, the business knowledge or something that you lack, right? But the accountability is huge, and I find that anytime I've ever worked with a coach, there's a balance, at least for me, where it's like I don't really want homework. I've never wanted homework, right? I don't think anyone has. But for me to step away from our monthly call and then have an action list of like 3 things to get done, right? I'm probably getting them done the morning I'm going to meet with them.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That was the case for us.
Very similar story. But I think a big value that we realized during the process too was that it carved out a space that the 3 of us would sit down uninterrupted to maybe go more macro with the business. Mm-hmm. And so that was like a big thing, learning for us to basically pull that back into our own business, and we set that side of time together that we do that now weekly, every Thursday morning type thing. So
how long do you go ahead, Todd?
I was just gonna ask, I think for myself and other people who are listening, to kind of broadly paint a picture of what you guys do before we get like too deeply into the nuance, because I think we could dig deeply, but absolutely. Just like what you guys do, because I was on your website and I wound up in French for a minute, and I was like, wait, how did I just do that? And I realized there's a French button. I was like, was it always in French? And I was just making sense of it for a minute. Just so I think our listeners kind of have an idea of what you guys do as we kind of dig into topics.
Okay, so I'll do my best to recap the last 10 years. It would have started as Ben. He entered into the trades pretty young, probably 17? 16. And he worked in multiple different facets of the industry, and eventually started to do his own carpentry on like sort of a self-carpenter for hire. And he was doing projects, and at the same time, he did that for a bit. And about the time I hit around 16, I was doing the same, joining him. And like he said, we were doing, decks, renovations, roofing, all of the above. But part of our family in general, our values, is just probably looking at the world a little different, and maybe taking a different approach to that. So we always had a deep curiosity for doing construction differently. And you could probably name any sort of facet of how to build a house. We've tried it. We've done rammed earth, we have done timber frame, SIPs, stick frame, double wall, everything. And so that was like probably the exploration phase for a couple of years of our life in the industry anyways. And then we got, I guess, pretty interested in probably the energy side of it. So that was, more into the high performance building. So that sort of led us to passive house, that being probably one of the standards that we looked at to being one of the better models of the industry. So passive house led us to Germany and sort of the origins of Passive House. And so on a trip to Germany,
similar to what you just did.
Similar to what you just did in Switzerland, which I imagine you came back probably questioning your whole life.
my entire existence.
And during that trip, actually, prior to that, we had done one house using mass timber, which is, a broad category of basically engineered timber products that, you can use through cross industry of, commercial to residential. And that really opened our eyes in the European tour to two things. One was the mass timber industry, and second, the pre-manufacturing side of it. So upon return, we were like, that's it. We're going to start building this way. But I think at the time, the market was probably still a little young to adopt a lot of our ambitions. So we've been working at this for, a long time, whether it's selling, high performance, high energy, whether it's adopting, the European standard of, triple pane windows, whether it's European standards of the prefabrication side of it, because, the North American prefabrication was a lot different than what you're seeing in Europe. And so to this day, now we have basically transitioned into one system that we have tried and tested all of these other ones. And that is a CLT, which is cross laminated timber. And that is a wood fiber insulation on the exterior of that. And then basically a rain screen that you can attach any cladding to. And then hybrids of, whatever foundation or roofing system. And we prefabricate that in a facility, and then we deliver that to site.
Including the windows.
Windows.
So we take it a step further. So there's a lot of what's in the industry with CLT, what everyone classifies as being like just CLT alone. They say CLT is like pre-manufacturing your wall system. But we figured out after the first house that we did, we said, well, it's stupid really to put all your insulation and do everything else on site when you're only 30% of the way there. So we take the CLT, we lay it on a table, we'll put the insulation on, we'll put the strapping, double strap or single strap, depending on orientation of the siding, and then we'll go into putting the walls up vertically, and we pre-install the windows, do all the window taping, flashing. We even go to the point of prepping for all the siding, depending on the siding, from the window flashings. So really when we deliver on site, we're screwing the corners together and we're siding subcontractor can start applying siding. So that's, so CLT is one thing and mass timber is one thing, but we're taking it, let's say 3 steps further by bringing all the components on board and making it a whole assembly rather than just the CLT. And that's where we believe that there's a way more value than just bringing CLT, or I always say it's really expensive framing at that point. We do projects for people where they want CLT because we have the specialty in terms of the install. We'll go and do it, but then we walk away from there, and then you still have to bring all the other trades in, and you basically spent a couple $100,000 in framing. So it's
right.
So that's where we look at it again differently, and we just took over a larger facility where we went from our proof of concept 3,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet plus a 3,000 square foot annex with dual overhead cranes, where we're now actually building indoors, not just lifting with a machine in our garage trying to make this proof of concept work. So
yeah, that's basically the last 10 years.
Got a lot done in 10 years though.
Well, you know what? Everyone overestimates what you can do in 1 year, and they underestimate what you can do in 10 years.
Yeah, I kind of listening to you guys earlier about what you've done and where you are right now and what you're looking to do, and even trying all of these different types of home builds. I'm sure that it doesn't seem like it. 10 years is a long time. When you're in it, it probably was a grind and moved very slowly. But at this point now, when you kind of run through the big picture, there had to be a lot of trial and error and struggle and like market testing, price it. Like, how do you even go about that when you're like looking to be where you are, trying to figure out what your market can bear, what you guys can do, and you're just trying all of these different construction methods?
it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
I don't think there was much strategy and thought. At
We
the
didn't take the
beginning.
easy route.
I think it was just like, let's try it out and see where it goes. And
We had a lot of willing clients, we can put it that way.
it definitely got us in some tough situations at times. But I mean, you can technically get through anything if you have the right team and the right attitude. But yeah,
Everything's a lesson.
everything's a
Look at it that way.
lesson. Yeah. Obviously, we have a lot more strategy now. With time, you get experience and you learn from your mistakes and everything like that. But I think for the most part, it was just like, let's try it.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's your market like that you're able to go to all of these different customers in 10 years and be like, hey, we're going to try this or we're going to try that? Or did you have people coming to you and you were just like, yeah, sure, we'll do it?
This podcast is brought to you by Duration Molding and Millwork.
Nick, today we had on some guests from America's Hat, Canada.
America's Hat,
right?
Yeah, Canada.
So we talked about a lot of things, revolving around Canada. We talked about maple syrup, poutine, hockey, Tim Hortons.
That's 4 no's
winter
in a row.
bacon, Canadian bacon.
Ham.
Yeah, Canadian bacon. No, but one, I was kind of thinking, we were discussing in the podcast how harsh their winters can be. And I don't know, ever since we've been dealing with Duration and the Boral line of products, I feel like I'm always thinking of really good places where you could use the True X. And I'm like, they have a pretty healthy swing as far as temperatures go between seasons, like where it gets pretty warm in the summer and then very cold in the winter. And I know that I used the Truex on a project around here where we have pretty good temperature fluctuations, moisture fluctuations, and some pretty long runs of that, trimming out some fascia, subfascia, soffits, and it doesn't move with those temperature swings and with moisture. So I feel like maybe we should get a little bit more of the Duration and Boral Truex up to America's Hat, help them out there.
Let's do it. If you're from up there and you want to learn more about it, head over to the website, durationmillwork.com. This podcast is brought to you by Rockwool, high-performance, fire-resistant, soundproofing stone wool insulation for your interior and exterior walls. So you guys got to be part of this R-Class program. Funny enough, they actually sent me another swag box. I'm not sure if one of my guys signed up, but another box with a bunch of Rockwool knives, a custom flannel, so basically a swag box. And I'm not saying that you got to sign up for the swag box, just an added benefit. The real part of it, or the real benefit of it, is the premium partnership that you really have with not only their technical team, but just the community of other contractors that are using this stuff. You know, I've talked to Travis over at Catalyst Built, who's part of the R-Class program, and he actually helped me through some detailing for our comfort board installation on our concrete wall. He was using fasteners. He even gave me a link to the gun that we can use to get that installed onto concrete, but also was super helpful in some of the stucco detail that we were working out with Julia and on her build. So it's really about that community and that partnership with the technical team to not only be able to bounce ideas off of each other, but also have the technical backup to make sure that what we are installing is truly going to work.
Yeah, I think I haven't gotten a Rockwool swag box. I think I got to sign up.
Well, if you want to sign up, head over to rockwool.com/rclass.
I didn't even ask you to tell me how to do it, but thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, somewhere and somewhere. So some were our ideas and concepts that we had to sell, and some were like, say, our first rammed earth house. There was a random client came, and he was like, I think at the time there might have been a couple in Canada and our entire nation, and then we're just like, yeah, we'll do it. So yeah, it's a mixture of both. But like, I mean, going back to your point of like, just getting things tested and certified and all whatnot, like even our wall system now, where we get a lot of, roadblocks and gatekeepers into getting things certified, or and depending which market we're in, because again, prefabrication, we can send this, it doesn't limit us geographically. So depending where we're going, it can always be a challenge.
Nick, you probably run into this more so than me as well, and you guys, but you have a customer who comes to you and wants something crazy like that you haven't done before. I think I'd rather that situation than proposing and selling that situation when it's your idea, because in your back pocket the whole time you could be like, listen, this is what you wanted. But if you sell a customer on something like, yeah, let's make you a rammed earth house, and then it's like an absolute nightmare, a lot of that, I mean, a lot of it's on you, but I feel like at least you have that in your back pocket.
It's interesting because I had a project, I think it was right at the beginning of this whole COVID thing, and it was a very normal house. And when I had met with them, I had talked to them about like improving the wall system, doing exterior insulation and everything. And like they didn't really care about it, but they were like, yeah, that's fine. Like I'm down to build a more energy efficient home with better products and materials. And and I've told this story before, but I sold it, right? I'm like, got it. Like they're in for it. And they knew it was more expensive. Well, one of them knew it was more expensive, and then the long and short of it is the other one didn't realize how much they were spending on this house and canceled the job and pulled the contract on us and everything. And I always think about that. It's like, man, that's exactly what you're saying, Tyler. It's like I'm sitting there trying to sell something that they don't want, frankly. And it's like, and I was doing it because I wanted to build a better product for us. And ultimately, obviously, with the client, but the client didn't value it. Where it's, a client that values it and comes to you, like our project in Rhode Island, Julia, that's what she wants. She came to us with a very specific request, and we were like, yeah, we'll execute on that. And it's complex, it's detailed, there's a lot of nuances to doing it.
I think where we sell our clients on it is in the speed of construction. Like we can talk about all we want about energy efficiency, this and then that, and then we said, yeah, but we can also put the house up in 3 days once it's done. They're like, oh, okay. And then like they're sold there. So it's like Jake always says, the energy performance is sort of like a byproduct of what we're actually selling. Like, so it's not necessarily, we're not necessarily saying to you, we're going to, you do get a good high performance airtight house out of our assembly because it's straightforward. It's two different materials we screw together, very minimal corners, very minimal joints to the exterior. So it makes it really easy for us to hit that, below passive market standard in terms of air tightness. We can achieve that almost every time. But then, but the speed of construction by telling people that you can assemble your house in a week and you can lock your door is where everyone just, we'll overlook it, the rest of it.
Listen, so. you don't have to convince me on off-site construction panelization.
Can you put that finger down, please? It's distracting. This one? No, the other one that's all bent.
I was like, what are you talking about? For those the new listeners, I put my finger through a table saw years ago. Now I'm self-conscious. Tyler.
Sorry, you just use the other hand.
Keep my hands up now. But it's, especially after visiting Switzerland and seeing the CLT and the mass timber construction and the way they build. It's funny. I was reading some of the comments. We posted a handful of videos from our tours over there, and most of the comments are like, "This is ridiculous." They're like, "Why would you build out a CLT and then cover it with a concrete slab? Just build it out of concrete." Or it's like. This is just all of the comments of like they're overbuilding it. I'm like, it's actually quite the opposite. They've simplified so many things, and it's very fast. It's very efficient, And I always like, this is what we struggle with in video, is that similar to the post in the corner window at Julia's house. Like people are like, that's stupid. It looks terrible. It ruins the view. It's like maybe the camera doesn't do a good job of capturing that space. Well, I know it doesn't do a good job of capturing
Maybe people are just
space.
Dicks.
Well, people are definitely dicks too, but it's it's so hyper focused because it's so up close, right? And you don't really get to experience the whole space or the whole process in building with CLT panels.
Yeah. I mean, when you're going into a space, the experience is like, it's a physiological experience. So you're not getting that same experience, whether it's just over video or audio or whatnot. Right. So, I mean, it is very hard to convey it. And like, that's something that, like, the same thing when we were there, you try to come back and you try to sell someone on that. It's very hard because it's more of an experiential, I guess, understanding.
Luckily for us, like the second CLT project ended up being a commercial cafe in the village that's really close to us. So a lot of people have been able to go in and like experience what CLT feels like and whatnot. So that actually really helped us with our wall system after that point.
What a great idea. Whether that was intentional or not, like to make that. Be like, you know what? I wonder how we can break into the CLT market. Let's build a place that everyone goes to every single day, so they see it and ask the question.
Yeah. Well, we've actually, one of our good clients that we built there, that we did our YouTube series on, they walked into that cafe and they said, "Who built this place?" And then they basically got our phone number and they showed up at our office 20 minutes later, and then we designed it and built it. So that was exactly one of our.
Is that the Arden House?
Yeah.
Dude. I watched that video and I sent it to an architect that we're trying to build a CLT, the one I reached out to Jake about, and it was asking about a cost perspective. But I actually just sent that video to them, and because one of the things in CLT is like, it is more expensive to build, like the walls are more expensive. But one of the things I mentioned in the client meeting the other day was like, but what if we don't plaster or drywall the interior? And like then we got rid of that entire line item.
Yeah.
And like, we could consider that in the Arden House. I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, I have to send this to them.
Yeah.
Do you?
Well, I mean, I did that. Go ahead.
Do you guys typically work in your area?
So, I mean, for the first good portion of our careers, yeah, it was. But now we're definitely branching geographically for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of going through my head that. As long as like you don't necessarily need to create the market close to you.
That was exactly sorry to cut you off, but that was exactly the sort of the premise of that, was that we were having the trouble of the market adoption.
Yeah. So
essentially, if we were trying to sell a passive house or we were trying to sell a mass timber house, we had to go way bigger.
Yeah. Because I mean, I'm thinking again. I'm kind of hung up on you guys trying all of these different build types, getting going, and I'm like, are there just that many people who have that much money who are willing to be like, you know what? Let's just, because at the end of the day, if you want something like that, a lot of people like you aren't necessarily recouping that financial investment. They're wanting to do it for a certain reason. And it's a special client, and you would have to be in a pocket of extreme wealth or like a very progressive area. But if you're able to build the way you guys are building, and it's not on site, and then delivering to site and putting together in a few days, you really aren't limited by geographic location.
No, definitely not. That's most of our staff hiring is based on willingness to travel at this point too, because we have that, like again, like a lot of the first couple of years of our of getting to mass timber, we spent a lot of time in the Toronto area. Like we're in Ottawa, so we're about 4 hours away, almost 5 hours away, depending on what part of Toronto.
Which is Canada's capital for all the American listeners.
Who knew?
Tyler calls it the America's hat.
And so yeah, like we put up a fire hall out in Oakville. We did other mass timber projects right downtown Toronto, like when it was really little things anything that was basically mass timber that we basically took it on to get the experience, but also get the exposure. And from that point now, we have different opportunities, but I think we've set our standard in terms of what we want to do. And I think because of that, people come to us with what with what we're doing. So a lot of that issue of trying to sell it now is they come to us already knowing what we're doing, and we just have to basically design it and put a price to it. So we are a design build firm too. I mean, we didn't even really get into that, but that's like, we had halfway through, I'd say 3-4 years in, because we were gearing towards more high performance. We were trying to make, there's a lot of specific detailing around air tightness, all these, where does your vapor barrier go? What is your vapor barrier? And trying to get designers and architects on board to do what you actually want to do versus what can get what we wanted to do is always a challenge. So I self-taught myself how to use SketchUp and started designing. Basically started designing doing our own designs. Obviously, bringing in architects and design technologists where needed. But now we have a team where we have 2 design technologists. We have our production designer as well for our panelization, and then I still am slightly involved in some of the conceptual. So I'll just build up a SketchUp model based on our site visits and really looking at what I call a canvas, is like when you're really trying to have a high performance sort of building, you need to really look at the site. It's very important that you have the proper orientation, you've taken everything into consideration. So I can generally build up a model, and then we hand it over to the team, and then it goes from there. That's really how it's structured in terms of the design phase. And we still work with other architects and designers who come to us with current design, and then we'll just go and send it out to the production, for it to be turned into a panelization, essentially.
And the panel system doesn't change, which is the beauty of it, right? So it's like, we'll do a CLT wood fireboard rain screen, and you can apply pretty much any cladding to that, and you can apply any interior finishing to that. Because, a lot of people will do, say, if you want a perfect flat surface, you're going to do an engineered stud or whatnot. And this gives you the freedom. If you're going to drywall over it, you don't even have to look for a stud. So basically this system is very simple. It's 3 components, but gives us basically broad spectrum of flexibility into the market.
And going back to your confusion on how we were able to achieve all these different types of projects, I think it's the classic construction move where you don't price things out properly in the first place. So you don't know what you don't know. So we had some hard lessons to learn for some fixed price contracts. And unfortunately for cost plus contracts, some clients, obviously things end up being more. So those scenarios have also played out a few times in our company. So
yeah, that's funny. One of my questions I jotted down was, how were you guys making money in pricing jobs during your exploration phase, as you called it?
Yeah,
we weren't.
One of our key reasons to restructure is because we financially were in a pretty tight situation. So it kind of got us to a point where we really had to think about the company as a whole and what we wanted to do and where we wanted to go. So it was a really hard decision because we had to lay off half the team, and we're in a small town, so people we grew up with and whatnot. So that was really tricky, but it really led us to the point of what do we want to do? What are we doing? And let's really figure this out. So that's what happened at that time.
Karina, going back 6 years, what was it why did you want to join Ben and Jake?
Yeah. Is she your sister or cousin?
Yeah, we're all brother and sister.
We're 6 kids in our family.
That's why I said I'm the second youngest.
I completely missed that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So yeah, we actually have 3 other sisters as well.
Oh man, 4 girls. Jesus, that's a lot of girls.
Yeah.
I mean, 6 is a lot of kids. Nick and I are both 5.
Yeah. Oh really?
Yeah, but I was 4 boys and 1 girl.
That's a lot of boys.
I feel like boys are way more manageable, though. It's my mom always used to say they kick and spit, but what you see is what you get. And girls, it's all emotional, hidden layers and layers of uncovering. I mean, I have 2 daughters, so I can say it now. I mean, I'm going to go through it. But with the boys, the issues are I hit so-and-so with a baseball bat. I kicked somebody's teeth in. And with the girls, it's it's a lot deeper.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that aspect, but yeah.
So we have I don't know. Answer that question. Why do you want to join?
Yeah, sorry, going back to that question. I had just graduated university at the time, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was kind of exploring a bunch of different options, and we have a unique family situation where we were homeschooled. So we spent a lot of time together growing up. We traveled through South America for 3.5 years. We ran across the country together, kind of crazy scenarios. So we're pretty close, and we work well together. So it was kind of an exciting idea to work with family. We also had other family businesses before where I worked with my sisters, we worked with our parents. So working as a family together seemed really appealing to me. And also from the outside, I didn't know coming in the financial situation that I was getting into, but it was always really exciting and fun. They were doing cool projects. They had all these people working with them. So it seemed like a really fun and environment, and it's still a great environment to work in. But so I started working with them, and then I realized they really needed my help. So I've been here ever since.
It's way better when you get paid too.
Yeah, that too.
Did you study finance?
I was in management. I actually went into accounting major, and then after like one semester, I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. But so I did have a lot of like accounting courses and financial courses and whatnot.
So you came on to. I'm getting a little feedback on my end.
I can hear that. Yeah.
Is it from us?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It went away. That's so weird. Roll with it, right? So you came in, but your role at that point was to kind of help get into or financial management. Was that initially?
Not at all.
No.
I started like sanding and staining timber frame kits.
Oh, cool.
It was a bit of everything. Like, they weren't so very structured in the first place. So like, they were like, yeah, for sure, get involved. But it was sort of like, I jumped in, and then I would kind of like pay attention to what was going on and then see where I could fill in the gaps, basically. So it was definitely like 6 to a year of just trying to figure out where obviously once I got into the finances, I realized that was the area that needed the most attention.
Sure.
But yeah, so it took a while to really like, as a business owner, you start doing a little bit of everything, right? So I just started filling in the gaps where needed and then working on the financial side of the business a lot.
This may be completely off topic, but what's the post high school college situation in Canada? Is it similar to ours?
Well,
I feel like we live under a box, Nick.
we're also in Quebec, which is like a French province. It's a whole other nation in itself. Like Quebecois people call Quebec its own country, basically.
Yeah.
So we have high school until grade 10. In Ontario, it's till grade 11. Grade 11, and then Ontario they go to grade 12, which is similar to the U.S. if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
And then in Quebec we have a college, so you can go directly to university in Ontario, but if you wanted to go to university in Quebec, you actually have to go to a college for 2 years, and then
it's called a CEGEP.
CEGEP, yeah. And then you go to university after the fact.
And which is that you guys are paying out of pocket for that?
Quebec's actually you do. It is subsidized by Quebec has great in terms of like, well, you pay into your taxes and stuff like that, but it is less expensive to go to school in Quebec. You are paying for it, but nothing like you guys pay in the United States.
Yeah, I was just
like a tuition back when I was going to school was $3,000 Canadian.
Yeah. That's a good deal. I'm about to send my kids up to Canada when they're about 16.
and college was like $500 a semester.
Yeah.
So.
What?
That's also we're gonna make the move. I was looking at a map. Canada is. I mean, I guess it's not that. It's huge. I just like think of the East Coast Canada and West Coast Canada and forget that there's everything in the middle. But
didn't we have
everyone forgets about them?
Yeah, like Winnipeg.
Yeah.
The heck do they do
there's
there?
There's also like the whole.
Not much.
But isn't like
we're gonna get so much trouble.
It's unpopulated in like the northern part of Canada, right? Like there's not a lot of people that live up there.
Yeah, I mean you can depending which parts. Like if you can go up, into the territories, which is more central. But like, I mean, most remote communities are all fly-in. Like you can't even
up north.
Yeah.
We're looking at building like helping, some communities up north, and there's like you have a window where you can send a ship twice. There's 2 ships that go up there a year, because of the ice. So you basically have to, time everything right and whatever else. So
that's crazy.
Get your list going. It's like I forgot the toilet paper.
It's a big country. A lot of the population is condensed into certain areas for sure.
No, but we're all within like what is it? The lower. We're very close to the States. Most of the population is right next to the States, regardless, because it's going further north, you just get more rugged. So
it's so interesting. Like the entire U.S. is just people.
Yeah. We ran across Canada and the U.S. We spent 7 months running.
What does that mean?
So we did what's called the Marathon of Health. So my dad was he's a chiropractor, and he like obviously, he was very passionate about prevention.
Well, you can go back a little bit. So back in what was the year that Terry Fox ran? Do you know?
Forget.
For the record, my chiropractor tells me running is the worst thing I can do.
Yeah, our dad.
But go on.
Yeah.
He also says that.
He also says that now, but back then that wasn't what he was saying.
Anyways, there's a bit of a Canadian hero who I think it might have been the 80s, who ran across the nation for cancer, and he actually lost one leg, so he was doing it sort of one-legged. And
with
father,
the prosthetic.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And
so my father,
I had to clarify.
so my father saw him run, and he was very inspired by what he was standing for and his journey and everything that he was doing. And he said at the time, one day I would love to run across the country. And this was about 2011. He was getting into his 60s, and he basically sat, it was a family dinner, and he said, this has always been a goal and a dream of mine, and if I don't do it like at this point in my life, I probably won't be able to. So he was going to run across the country. So we all, kind of, as we spoke about, we're a bit of a family unit. We all kind of said, well, if you're going to do it, we're going to do it too. So he said, well, if you're all going to do it, then we're going to run across the United States as well.
We ran in a relay.
So we did it in a relay, but it wasn't like a traditional relay, like passing a baton, but essentially, yeah, we were doing one after the other. And so we ran for 8 months, basically starting in Vancouver, across the Canada, the Eastern Seaboard, St. John's, then down to New York, and then we finished in LA. We were supposed to go back up to Vancouver and do one big loop, but by the time we went ocean to ocean to ocean, we were done.
That's insane. That I would lead off every conversation with that. I don't know how it took us. How far are we into this? Like, how did it take that long to touch on this?
Yeah. Well.
Oh, it's been 11 years.
Yeah.
Wait. So how long were you guys running for at a time?
That's what I was.
It changed.
Yeah.
But at the end, when we wanted to get really far, we were all doing 20 kilometers each per day.
No,
more.
miles.
Yeah, sorry.
Miles, yeah.
Miles.
Oh my God! I'd be like every
20 miles per
15
day,
minutes
every day?
I'd be like, all right, get me the car.
Probably the craziest stretch was basically Nevada, Arizona, across into finishing into California. We were just basically
Marathon a day.
We were basically trying to finish at that time. And I was doing 30 miles a day, and they were doing
Like
20 miles a
20
day.
to 25 miles a day.
Every day.
Every day, yeah. For a couple
Wait,
But
so
we
hold on.
started out doing like
10 to 15
at the most
kilometers, so 10 miles a day.
And then our training was, as we started going across the country, started getting better and better, and like doing more and more.
And then the injuries started. And
That's what I was gonna say. Like, how do you actually do that? Like, how that would be I feel like one of the worst things for your body.
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was not very good. We did have a chiropractor traveling with us, so that did help. But yeah,
I mean, my knees would be like swollen. My knees are swollen after 20. Like when I've done the marathon twice in Boston.
Yeah,
I'm not fast.
And a year
I'm
break
slow.
in between or more.
It just under a year break.
Let's just say we don't run anymore.
360 days.
Yeah.
More rest than they were having.
Yes. But my point is my knee was, destroyed.
No,
And to think that, like, to wake up the next day, I know exactly how I felt the next day.
You gotta break in the first 3-4 miles, and after that, you're just like, okay, you just limp through the first 3-4 miles, and you're back into it.
It's really like a mind game more than a body.
Totally.
Game,
That's
sure.
what what's his name? Goggins says. It's all in your mind.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wasn't as successful with this amount of mileage. I broke my hip snowboarding a long time ago, so I was really struggled a lot more than everybody else. So, but yeah.
But I mean, it was another experience that just taught us that, like, I mean, I say if I can run across 2 countries, then you can do anything, right? So it just like showed us that, like, what your potential is and what you're capable of. Like, there was lots of challenges and lots of things you had to push through. So it was another great learning experience. Our parents are a bit non-traditional and have put us through a bunch of different things like that. So.
We also all hopped in a van when our youngest sister was 3 years old, and we spent 3.5 years in a van traveling South America. We went to 13 different countries, and my dad pioneered chiropractic. So, again, we're already starting young. We had a little bit of a different upbringing. So, They
And you
Yeah,
guys
I
were
mean,
all homeschooled, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, or kindergarten dropouts is always my joke. I went to kindergarten and then got and Jake too. He went for 2 days. I think my mom, when we were in Santiago in Chile, he went for a couple of days, and Jake told my mom, "He's like, Mom, it's so loud I can't even think to play." So my mom kept him back, and he had fun hanging out at home. So but yeah, we were all homeschooled. So we did. I was interested in becoming a chiropractor like my dad, but I realized. After I almost need 10 years worth of school to get there. And I was definitely not willing to put that time in. I mean, as much as chiropractic is hands-on, and I would love to do that, the 10 years, I'm just not someone who can sit down in a schoolroom for 10 years to get there. So
Some of the girls, like myself, my two other sisters, like we went to high school at grade 10, because in Quebec, like credits only start in grade 10. So up until that point, nothing counts towards your degree. So you can start in grade 10 and then get your high school diploma. So that's what we did.
It was always a choice. Like if we wanted to go to school, and like, some of our younger sister, she went at grade 9, and it's just if you wanted to do your homeschooling or you wanted to go to school.
So what was that transition like into public schooling from like an academic perspective? Did you struggle?
No, I'm pretty academic in that sense, where I read a lot. Like I was a bit of a bookworm growing up. So I think like if you read a lot, like it gets you really far, and you have homework. Like we did our mathematics and everything like that. So
yeah, I mean,
it really, what was hardest to transition was the amount of people I was around. Like my first day was just like, holy, like there's this many people in the world. Like we had a homeschooling group and we were like 30 kids. So like we had friends. Like it wasn't like we were home alone all the time, like we socialized, but it was just like, that was the biggest like challenge with transitioning to school. But in terms of, the academic side of it, I was, not to brag or anything like that, but I was on the honor roll right away. Like I had no issues transitioning, but again, like I fit well into that system.
Yeah, I guess that's why I kind of asked, because I don't know Canada, but I know in the United States, like it's a system and it's designed a certain way. And if you understand how to kind of work that system, you can get through schooling by being a good test taker and on paper, being very intelligent and not actually putting forth that much effort. I'm not speaking from experience. But I feel like if you don't understand that going into school, that would be a very abrupt transition.
Yeah. It was also interesting because like you'd spend 8 hours in school, or 7 hours, I forget what it was. But like we used to spend like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours in the morning doing our schoolwork, and that was it. So like you spread out like the actual, couple hours that you need to actually learn over 7 hours. So that was the other big adjustment. But I mean, it was really to like socialize and meet new people. That was really the reason.
Well, I went to high school for 1 day because I had our friend group, and they invited me to go to high school for 1 day just so I figured maybe I'll go just to have that social. But it was such a waste of time, in my opinion. Like the time you get on the bus, you go there, you sit in all these different classrooms doing like, for an hour or whatever, and nothing gets done. Like the whole system is like, to me, it was like just like a whole waste of time. And like what Karina just said, we can do it 2.5, 3 hours in the morning. We get way more done, and you're teaching yourself a different way of learning. Again, it's not for everybody. Everybody learns differently. That's what the system is also not sort of geared towards, is that everyone learns differently as well. So,
And not to like totally hate on the school system. Like there are good things that come out of it, like learning to work in team environments, which you can do in other scenarios, but I find there were good. You do learn things, like not the physical material. I find like you learn how to socialize, you learn how to be around people. Like, so that aspect.
But do you need to do that for 12 years, of formal, like, and that's how I felt, to be honest. Like I was so bored in school, where it was like I just would not pay attention in class, and then I would take homeroom, I would take a study hall, and I would do all of my work for the next day, basically like going through the book, crunching, learning it myself, and I just wouldn't pay attention in class, or I'd go walk the hallways, and it was just because I like, it was so much of a waste. I didn't want to be there. There was like, they gave you 8 hours to do an hour and a half worth of work. And it was so frustrating to me. And then they're like, you're going to do this for 12 years. And I have customers now that are homeschooled, and they're done schooling. You know, they start after I get there, and they're done by like lunchtime. And I'm like, that's what I should have done.
Yeah. Yeah, we go bike the village when we grew up. It was like you just head out on your bike and you're just, just doing your own thing. You explore, I mean, there's a lot more freedom in terms of, and teaching yourself things too. Like the thing about these curriculums, once you learn to read, then you're essentially teaching yourself. So it's also giving you that sort of capability in life that it's, a lot of the system is not geared towards now. Like everyone, it's a rat race they want you to be a part of. That it's like,
it teaches you to take that initiative. Whereas like in school, it's sort of like you're sort of mentally conditioned that you need to have a professor in a class to teach you something. So like when you go out in life, it's like you're looking for that person to teach you how to do something instead of like just being like, hey, there's lots of ways that I can figure out how to learn this and teach it myself. But like, because you just spent like the 12 to 16 years, like sitting in classrooms being taught things, you kind of forget that you can actually just teach yourself as well.
Yeah, you're like not that self-sufficient. Do you attribute a lot of your business model and kind of thinking outside the box to that upbringing and being homeschooled rather than being in like a public school system your entire lives?
Yeah, definitely.
Nick.
Yeah, the outside the box scenario for sure. Like, I mean, that's just our upbringing is like, everything we did is what can we do different, what can we do better? That's I think a lot of people have the mentality as well, but I think it's rooted for us.
I need to look up more homeschool people because the only one right now I can think of off the top of my head, Nick, is Zach Detmore.
Yeah.
And like it's the same thing. He's always looking, how can I improve? How can I do this differently? And I'm curious how many other people that we know were homeschooled and kind of had that same mindset.
Interestingly,
so you guys aren't
chat.
just weird.
Exactly.
Yeah, a little bit as well.
I've chatted with Meg about this, and primarily because in something that you guys are doing, I'm really interested in building around the world. That's like kind of my big goal. And my big goal is to just build like really amazing homes anywhere in the world. And I was chatting with my wife about it, and she's like, I mean, these kids are just gonna have to be homeschooled. And I was like, I mean, is that the worst thing though? And she's like, well, no, it's just, and that was it. That was the conversation.
I can give you guys a bit of history of the system that North America follows. It's called the Perusian model. So back in the early 1800s, when Napoleon invaded Prussia, he defeated them, and at the time they were very hurt by the loss. So they went back to their leading intellectual at the time, and he basically derived a plan to set up an education system to essentially create soldiers that wouldn't run away in battle. So they wanted them to be more compliant. And so very much of what we're seeing in the system that is like the public school system today came from that model. So prior to that, you had like the Romans and the Greeks that, would walk and do lectures out in gardens and walking and no set times. So, or you had, so that's where you see like the rows of desks in front of one teacher and then set curriculums to a time, to a bell. Anyways, all this makes sense if you're trying to create, obedient soldier to join essentially an army. But, it's not historically how we were teaching before. And then at the time, there was another, I can't remember the name of the man from actually where you are, Nick. Then he saw the process and he brought it over to Boston, and then it's kind of snowballed. And essentially a lot of the same methods are where it came from.
Why do you know that?
Because he's homeschooled. They know all sorts of weird stuff.
It's because you self-teach. You can actually look. Yeah.
Jake listens to a lot of podcasts. I mean, that's how we got onto you guys, and he sends us videos, podcasts all the time. So most of my education in building is from Jake.
What do you think from like an employee perspective, hiring somebody who is homeschooled versus not homeschooled? I know everyone's different, but like you guys want to obviously like take a different approach, not necessarily follow the rules, think outside of the box. Like you love that with an employee, but there's also sometimes there's rules and standards that need to be followed. I guess kind of what's your opinion on that? Like, do you feel that it would be advantageous to hire people within your company that think that way?
I mean, I think there could be a level of higher self-responsibility and self-accountability because, generally they are teaching themselves. So, I mean, generally in an employee, that's an amazing attribute. So, but the thing is, I think, yeah, I mean, for myself, I've only had one job in my entire life. And, I think you're following in home, so the public school system generally will sort of diminish your natural curiosity because you have to it sort of inhibits you from following it naturally. So, I mean, I think that's how you end up in more of an entrepreneur situation. So, I mean, if you're bringing in employees that, are going to work with you for many years and they're going to go off and start their own business, that's great too. I mean, it's only better too. So I think you could have maybe a lot more of that situation. But again, it's a very small pool. It's not like there's a lot of homeschoolers sitting around ready to hire.
So you worked one job, Jake. Did Ben or Karina, did you guys work for anyone, like another job?
Yeah, I have done quite a few different.
Did you hate it?
Well,
it wasn't.
No,
was it not for you? Like, do you feel as though you do better in the position you are now?
Yeah, I'm definitely better in the position I am now. But they're all jobs to pay for school, right? It was in my mind. It's I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. So you take those approaches of you do your best that you can, take those initiatives, and you work within the parameters that people give you.
I would like to see, Nick, what type of correlation there is between people who are homeschooled and being entrepreneurs, because I feel like so many people, I know that I would have benefited so much more from homeschooling than public schooling, and I own my own company and I want to do things my own way, and I don't necessarily want to do things the way that somebody tells me. And I wonder if that's just a personality trait that's common between people. If we asked business owners, do you think that you would have done better in a less formal school setting, or entrepreneurs in general?
Let me add to that. So
that was a question.
I know it was.
But you're adding to the question.
I'm asking another question
Okay.
on top of that question. What about your kids?
Honestly, for me, it's a time thing.
See, this is where my so when I had that conversation with Meg about homeschool and traveling the world and building all over the world, I'm like, inside in my brain, I'm like, school's great for the sense that my wife gets a break.
School's daycare,
socialization
and socialization for sure. But it's listening to you guys talk and hear, I've always thought that homeschooling could be beneficial over public school, because I felt the same way, not to the same level, Tyler, but I didn't like school. I felt bored. I wanted to go work. I wanted to go do something and contribute back to whether it was society or my bank account, whatever it was. I just knew that being in school was it felt like a waste of my time. And I wasn't, I was a decent student, but I wasn't a good student. I don't think I was on the honor roll or anything like that. But I think about that. I feel like that's because it is so normal for everyone to, I say normal, but you know what I mean, more common for people to be in public school, that having that conversation, but well, let's homeschool them. It's well, then it's the time commitment.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
People are dual incomes, both parents have jobs. It's who's gonna who's gonna homeschool the kids, and it's how do you afford that compared to the life that you have now, based on the schedule that you have now?
Yeah.
No, it's all challenges for sure. I mean,
all things we talk about right now too.
Yeah,
we all have
young kids
in daycare, so at some point it's go to school or figure something out. So.
I mean, we are already looking at building a school for our kids, pretty much, because we don't want to. To me, it's it's detrimental to send them. I mean, obviously I will if I have to, but it's like I'm going to do everything I can not to.
You say build a school, and a couple minutes ago you said you guys had a homeschool group. So when I think homeschool, I think my wife is literally like Googling how to teach them 2 + 2, but that's not what we're talking about, right?
No, I think like we had like activities weekly. Like we had music together where everyone would come to a certain person's house and you would play like music, you would learn music, then you have gymnastics, then you'd have
Who built that curriculum though?
My parents.
Your parents?
Yeah, I mean,
and they did their own research. Like they did, like read about homeschooling. They learned about different curriculum. So they all worked together. And the benefit of being homeschooled is you can actually go to like lots of locations during the week because everyone's in school. So like we used to go to gyms or do swim lessons with our groups.
Circus
like,
school.
Yeah.
This is sick. I want to like go to homeschool now.
Yeah.
Let's restart our
Dude,
life.
well, I mean, like what you're saying. So I would love to move somewhere where it's a little bit of a slower pace and just a little bit of a different lifestyle that we have. And like the hang up is
Switzerland.
right? The hang up is the girls and schooling. And it's like the system that's been created where you have to live somewhere with good schools, and places where there's good schools, it's expensive and you have higher tax. And like it all just keeps feeding the machine so that you can charge more money and get more money for the towns in those, or the houses in those towns. Their schools are more desirable, and it's like it's this perpetual snowball that continues to accumulate. And if you were to simplify and you were able to live a lifestyle that didn't cost as much money and you could have a single income, like I don't think that not having my kids in public schooling in the town we're in would be any more or less detrimental to their future. I think that that's kind of based on them and who they want to be. But like that's just the norm. So my thinking is completely out of the box there.
What an interesting topic we're on right now.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it as, until hearing you guys talk and kind of you led off the conversation. You didn't want to do things the normal way. You were always thinking to do things differently. And then looking at Zach and like knowing that Zach's mentioned that he's homeschooled and he has a very similar mindset. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's like not something that's necessarily as scalable as a public system, right? And to your point, like it is a perpetuating system. So it's not going to be for everyone, and it's certainly a challenge if you are going to try and do it. And we've, I think, very, very fortunate to have that opportunity that it was a choice for us, and I don't think everyone will get that choice.
I can't. So all 6 were homeschooled.
Yeah.
There's not one of you where it's like this kid needs to be in public school. I feel like to have 6 who were all
driving me crazy,
all like normal, and if my family, if they were like, all right, there's definitely some that would have been fine being homeschooled, and some where it's like, no, you need to be out with people.
Yeah. Well, again, that was a choice, and some people chose to.
Yeah.
Now that we have kids too, we just like don't understand how our mother did.
I know, it's crazy. That's
Yeah.
what my parents all the time. Like I'll see people that we knew growing up, and now that I have 2 kids, and they're like, "Don't you have so much more respect for your parents, being that they had 5?" And I'm like, "No, I have way less respect because I'm like, what the hell were they thinking? Like it was so insane. And why wouldn't you just be like, yo, 3's enough? Like." You just kept going.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like if you had, right, Nick, if you told Meg that she had to homeschool, obviously the time is one thing, but like it is nice to send the kids to school and be like, we won't see you for 8 hours. Like seriously, it is. They're annoying.
We do it at daycare too. You get a break.
Yeah.
But no, it's definitely.
No, that's why I really don't understand how she managed to do it all those years.
There had to be different times.
And not to mention, like, she was really going against the grain too, because her mother was a school teacher. And at the time, she really thought she might have been ruining our lives. So she really had to go against the grain and stand out, and she questioned it all the time. Right?
So what were your parents doing, like as you traveled through South America in a van to provide?
Our dad was a chiropractor, so there was only 13 chiropractors in all of South America back in 1996, seven.
Yeah,
So he basically went down. First place we stopped was in Peru, and he worked in a clinic there. And then we lived in Chile for a year and a half, and he set up 3 different clinics
and then sold those practices.
But it was like this crazy new thing. Like he literally was on the news all the time. He was on the radio, like
on TV.
Like,
was your dad homeschooled? I feel like this is. How did he even think that I'm gonna go to South America and like
franchise chiropractor?
Yeah. At the time, he was, he was coming home from work around 8:00 at night, and there was only, I don't think he was kind of. We were already in bed, all the kids, and so he was feeling like he wasn't part of our life, and so it was
a midlife crisis. When they were 40.
Yeah.
Basically, when they turned 40, they're like, we want to change our life. So he sold our house. Technically, they're still in now because the chiropractor who bought it never actually ended up buying it, but sold the house, sold the practice. So obviously that helps fund, the travel across all those countries. And then obviously the time that he set up practices and sold practices and brought other chiropractors down.
South America was relatively inexpensive. I know you're feeding 6 kids, so that there's a lot there, but it was, the cost of living is way different than North America, and especially the 30 years ago it was. Now is even
we used to get, I think, $80 a day Canadian we used to get by on in some countries,
for 8 people.
Because we living in hotels on the way down, but on the way back we camped. We spent 6 months camping. On the way back we built a box to the top of our van and just camped all the way back.
This is insane. We just ran. My dad sold the van and just made us run.
In your guys' life.
I have a serious question for you. So, all 6 of you siblings still get along pretty well?
Yeah.
We're all very close too. Like we all, except our youngest sister who became a chiropractor and went to school in New Zealand, and she is planning to move back because she has extreme FOMO of not being around everyone. But we all live in the area. We all have family dinners on Sunday nights pretty regularly. And obviously your siblings, you fight about things. You have moments of dramatic situations, but there's nothing that can happen that we know we won't all still be friends after.
Yeah, and I guess I think, looking at me and my siblings growing up and then my parents and their siblings growing up, and I don't feel as though they're as close as when we were kids. And obviously you're growing older, there's distance and separation, you have your own crap going on, but I couldn't imagine being around my siblings every day and working with my siblings every day. And to have 6 of you that you can do that's pretty impressive. And I almost want to know what your parents did to be able to create an environment where I have some of my siblings that I don't really talk to, and it I think a lot of that stems from, as we grew older, our parents didn't necessarily parent the way that they should have, to keep us together as an adult family unit. And I wonder if that's something that your parents did, if it's just all of your personalities, if it's just the way that it happened, to kind of keep the family unit intact and still in good standing as adults. Because I look at most families that I know, and as they become adults and kind of create their own lives, they don't stay as close.
I think it was probably these earlier experiences that
it was by choice. We didn't have much of a choice. We were stuck in a band together. At a certain time, we learned how to deal with each other then, and maybe that transitioned. There's no real direct answer to that, I don't think. But
it's I think it's a combination of a lot of different factors. Our parents were pretty super involved in our lives, but very hands off in terms of you guys are the ones that make your own choices. I
think that helps a lot. I think that's if there's one parenting advice that my mom might give us.
Let them decide for themselves.
Exactly. It's here's a few measures to stay safe, but in general, just go out and be safe. Do your own thing, and learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, it's even thinking with my kids now, and if I'm not there, they get along fine. Like they sort out what they need to. And then as soon as my wife or I walk into the room, then it's like, well, Tilly said this or Selby wants me to do that. And I'm like, you guys were just completely fine when I wasn't here for 2 hours. And as soon as I walk in, all of a sudden you need a referee. Like, I don't get why. Like, stop coming to me. Just figure it out on your own. And I think that is very important as a parent, as a sibling, even as like a business owner, to kind of to think about that, where it's like you have employees and pretend that I'm not here. And then what decisions are you going to make?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
which
So, I mean, this brings us back to like when you started the business, you were kind of grinding out through like decks and small projects, and then Karina, you came in basically 6 years ago, and then 4 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, you guys decided to restructure the company, and I'm thinking about all of these things that you've done your whole life as kids, the opportunities that you guys were given, and thinking about like running a business, which is, it's the cliche, contractor, right? Where it's like you're doing work, you're trading your time for money, and at the end of the year you have no money.
Yeah.
And and it's a very real thing. It's it's the craftsmanship mentality. It's just it is. It's you trade time for money, and then at the end of the day you have no additional profit. And to think about that 4 years ago when you decided to restructure the company, and and I want to go back to the conversation around the coach, I think is just interesting in how it ties back to your schooling in your life, and like the figure it out mentality, and the willingness to work through it. So I guess my question is, and I had asked it before, but I want to ask it a different way, is the coach's involvement. You got introduced to her, right? It was a girl? Yeah.
Yep.
You got introduced to her and realized that she could help you guys with your business. And in that moment, like, what specifically were you hoping to learn from her?
I think her presentation laid it out that, it sort of, from what I can remember, it was a while ago now, but it was the fact that HR was an issue for us at that time. Like, we didn't have any structure for HR whatsoever. So she sort of sold the idea of like, she, in our interview, she interviewed us essentially. And that was the one thing that she laid out, like, this is the one thing that we need to work on and get figured out first. And then, and then vision, mission, values was very, high up there on the list. So I think when in her sort of pitch towards us, she laid it out, and it just made a lot of sense. It's like, there's a lot of things that we don't have figured out yet. And it was a structure that she could provide that would help us through that. I don't know.
Yeah. And just to expand on that a little bit too, I think one of the things that they talked about too is like leadership within the company, and just going back to constantly wanting to learn and better ourselves, like working with someone outside of the company and outside of us three, just in terms of like developing that leadership in ourselves too, because it's really hard to see yourself as a leader, especially you get thrown into these business owner positions and you are a leader even if you don't see yourself as a leader. So really trying to develop that and like own that as well. So that was a big part of it. So just developing ourselves and carving out time to develop ourselves, and then also on top of that, like HR was definitely
What do you mean by HR was an issue?
Oh, just like people development, like in terms of like
even like an employee manual didn't exist.
Like we just didn't have any
nothing.
structure. Like we would hire people and not really have like the the structure in place to really like onboard them, and so it's just like
labor
obviously
laws.
There's like a lot of like time being wasted and things like that, and just hiring the wrong people too. Like you learn those mistakes many times, and unfortunately we learned that the hard way multiple times. So just like having those structures in place to like screen people a little bit better and understand like what we're looking for in individuals as well, because before I feel like we didn't really think about it. So having that kind of just like the guidance and like how to structure those things.
I mean, yeah, there was a bit of a disconnect too between, because at the time we weren't even pre-manufacturing anything, and to basically the vision of what we wanted to get to. And I think we felt as owners and leaders that we were not the people who could basically build and run that company. So it was like, how can we develop and get ourselves and into a position where, you know, we are the people who can, you know, build a company that's going to be, you know, multinationals, you know, or prefabricating, you know, industry leading in all these areas, you know. So it was a disconnect that we felt.
Yeah. So it's really about developing ourselves.
It's so rare, especially in our industry, for people to have that figured out. And I say that because you mentioned the handbook, and this morning, I got our draft handbook from our lawyer that I've been working on for years.
Yeah.
And I mean, I say working on it for years. I had something boilerplate that I added a bunch to, and finally had a lawyer look at it, and she was like, "Yeah, let me just redo this for you." I was like, "Sounds good." And but it's and job descriptions and onboarding and measuring performance and hiring the wrong people and firing people and like and doing it in a way that, you know, it isn't demoralizing and is, you know, and is structured, you know, like, hey, you know, you were onboarded with these expectations, you lacked the delivery in these areas, and that's why you're being fired.
Yeah, and it's performance managing along the way too, right? So my wife, who does the HR, you know, it's basically we do one-to-one check-ins with all the staff, and if there's areas that you're not meeting your job description or your expectations, you're aware of it, and so it's like we need to get you up to speed to these. And then if it's a consecutive thing, and you're not,
and also the positive feedback. There's so much that we have.
Just talking about the firing part, but
So
eventually,
you're really, really nice, but
but eventually it's an understanding. It's not really such a.
How often are you meeting with them?
It's supposed to be monthly. Sometimes life
that's
gets
a lot.
Yeah. Well, Sophie, Jake's wife, she worked at Lululemon before, and they were really about like people development and coaching. So I used to do all the one-to-ones, and it's not my area of expertise. So Sophie coming in and taking over really changed all of that for us.
So Jake's wife is also a huge part of the company.
Yeah.
And she's also joined us over the past couple of years and helped us, you know,
filled in a lot of gaps.
enormous amount of gaps, and has really helped us move forward, especially with the marketing area where, again, we don't like to, let's say, boast or talk about what we do. She'll put a paragraph out and send something out to someone and be like, I'm just like, oh, it's just like, you know, it's like, I wouldn't have said that, but hey, great. You know, it's just the whole, so anyways, that helps a lot to get ourselves, get us out there.
Yeah, we've definitely learned to like
hire
people that fill in the gaps of stuff that, you know, the skill sets that we don't have. So obviously that's something you learn with time as well. I know you guys talk about that on the podcast a lot. But.
So how many people do you have working for you guys now?
So we're
at 17 now.
We're 18 17, So we're 7 people in the office, and then 10 people on site.
That's big. And you said you guys were upwards of 20, right? Or
no, we were 15 to 17, I guess, was the biggest we've ever been.
Yeah, sorry. There's also the prefabrication team now too. So
we're
20.
We're up to 20.
Yeah. So there's the prefabrication team.
Like we have an amazing team. Now.
Yeah.
Everyone that's on board, it's just it's a real pleasure to work with everyone.
Like the interview process in terms of presenting vision, mission, values. So it's like both ways. Like we always, and there's a trial week, but like the initial conversation is just like, this is all about fit. So it's like both sides, you know, so it's like to see if you want to work with us long term as well, because
we let trial week works with where we work with our teams on site, and we get the team's feedback before we ever consider a hire. Like everything has to, like, I mean, like everyone always says that, but if you don't want to spend one day with them, you know, then why would you?
You can't envision working with someone the rest of your life. Don't work one day with them.
So where are you guys pulling the talent from, like the field and carpentry construction aspect of things?
Mostly it's been reaching out. Like, so, I mean, definitely over the last couple of years, we've put ourselves out there more on social media and whatnot. And, you know, I think most of the carpentry hires have been people reaching out through, say, Instagram
And referrals.
And referrals.
Yeah, people suggesting, being like, there's a company that's doing this stuff. You might want to reach out to them. And then a few people at a school as well.
Yeah.
Like there's a carpentry program in Ottawa, like a 1-year program at a college. And I guess there's some in...
2 people we've recently hired out of there. So, I mean, that's something basically you guys are looking into talking about. We don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of Quebec system because it's very... it's structured in a very funny way where it's the unions control everything, and it's can be very.
There's a lot of red tape.
It's very hard for us to do. Just hire anyone. That's for sure.
So
there's like ratios of like the different levels of carpenters, which hypothetically all makes sense. It's just the way that they go about it doesn't make sense.
So it actually follows the France system, which is like much more of a European standard, and so they kind of adopted it. But you're trying to adopt a system, like that here, where we also have very poor craftsmanship, and we don't have the same mentality, and we're a very young nation who hasn't been building that long, and all these things. So it just doesn't quite translate directly just over. You don't just bring the system over and it works. So it's a hard.
So how does that affect your business?
It affects the business in terms of like you have to have what's called like compagnons versus apprentices. So it's like
master carpenter,
I guess. Journeyman carpenter. So you have to have ratios. So you can have like a journeyman carpenter with like an apprentice 3 with an apprentice 1. So there's like ratios like that. So like you can have a really skilled carpenter who hasn't been working in the Quebec system and hire them, but they don't have that title just yet because they have to go through like all these loopholes in order to get that title, which is
typically 6,000 hours or proof of those hours and passing exams and something like that. So it makes it challenging to hire very competent staff.
So. And you can have a journeyman carpenter who's been working on a commercial site and has all the hours, but he's been hanging drywall only for the past 4 years. So like you put them on a construction site and you put them on finishing, and it's like, well, you're not at a journeyman carpenter level. So there's just like those types of things that are like challenges with this system right now. So, and you can have like an extremely skilled carpenter who is amazing at finishing and amazing at all the carpentry, but he doesn't have a certification because he wasn't in the system from the beginning. And then there's all this red tape regarding getting that. So there's just challenges in that sense where it's like you have to have those ratios.
So you can't hire somebody without their certification for a specific role?
You can, because I mean, it's for the union site. So a union site in Quebec is new construction or commercial or additions.
Mm-hmm.
But
as soon as you're adding square footage.
But in our facility, this is one huge sort of advantage is that as soon as we're building indoors, the unions don't apply. Okay. So we can avoid that whole system.
So you could hire your friend to be working.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the way we have a really good, solid on-site team now, and they become basically install. And if it's closer geographic, they will take a project start to finish. But essentially, we can run it pretty lean on site because we're doing so much of the front end in prefabrication.
Is on-site union?
Yeah.
Anything new house, commercial, or adding square footage is what we were saying.
You're just saying the actual fabrication of the wall doesn't have to be because it's
as soon as it's not off-site. So off-site is not it's not controlled by you.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, I understand and I get it, but that's the type of things where like, yeah, this makes sense on paper, but you're creating all of these issues where it could be the same people doing the same shit and it not be an issue.
But you know what it is? It's like it's the extreme of it, right? Where it's like,
for sure.
I mean, it's like this is a weird example, but it's like you can't drink when you're pregnant. It's like, well, you can, you just can't drink excessively. And instead of saying like don't drink more than 2 glasses of wine, they just say don't drink. Because then people are going to like be subjective of
it's like
it. Where
smoking
it's like,
while pregnant. No, it's not. That's different.
To dive a little bit deeper, I guess, into that Quebec system too. Whatever. The other thing that frustrates me the most is that there's all these systems in place, but there's nothing to actually verify the quality of work. Because as soon as they say you're certified, so us as a general contractor in the province, we need to be registered with the Régie du Bâtiment, which is like another entity that is for the employers, for enterprises. So if you are basically...
We get our contracting license.
If you have your contractor's license and you hire certified carpenters, the whole province is not inspected. There's no inspections anywhere throughout our province. So it is the worst place to buy a house if essentially, because you don't know that you don't know what's happening. And there's nothing that's versus we go 20 minutes north into Ontario from where we are, 20 minutes south, sorry, and we're into Ontario, and there's it's the same process as the rest of the country, where there's minimum 11 inspections throughout the whole process, and it's done right. But then you can hire anybody on the street. So again, this system is completely backwards in the sense of if you have that qualification, then we're good. And the union comes by and basically looks at if you're certified in terms of your union cards, and they'll fine you immense fines and shut your business down if you're not hiring these union people. But they don't care if you're not putting
the house could fall
over, but they don't care. So it's frustrating a system or province to be working in, but you basically just get through the paperwork and then you roll with it. But it also makes us very uncompetitive because we're paying 18 deductions on these people's paychecks, and you have the black market running beside you that is charging half the price cash. So it's but regardless, not everyone's looking for that, but it's that's reality of what it turns to. It pushes that side market because it only makes sense.
That's what I was going to ask you about that. Where how does this actually affect your business? And obviously it's a pricing thing. I'm sure it makes your labor pool a little bit more difficult. But at the end of the day, I think that there's probably a happy medium, but I would rather take a system in which there's requirements than something like ours or mine, Nick, where it's, you pay $70 a year with the Division of Consumer Affairs, and you can start a business, and there's inspections, but there's no legitimacy with testing. There's no standards, there's no requirements as far as who you're hiring, what sort of training they have. And I think that, again, there's got to be a happy medium there, but having things in place to legitimize your business when you're looking to run a legitimate business is a good thing, because it took me a long time to realize as well that there's always going to be those people who are going to be kind of flying under the radar, but your customers don't want that person flying under the radar. They want what you guys do, and they want it to be on the up and up. So what those people do is almost irrelevant to what you guys do.
No, we don't really notice it anymore.
Not anymore.
Once you figure it out and you understand how it works, to be honest, I think it deters people from operating in Quebec. So it actually kind of gives you a leg up in terms of because if you have a construction company in Ontario, you actually physically can't work in Quebec.
Yeah, because we're on the border, right? So we can go work over there and they can
unless they were to get their license and get their CCQ and everything set up. So it does help. To a certain extent.
Yeah, well, also back to your point, I think everyone's on the same playing field, right? When you're getting into commercial bidding, you're working into anything else. Everyone is working with the same union rates, same thing. So it's so it does create the sort of same playing field to a certain extent. But what going back to what I disagree with is just the inspection scenario and
silly.
Some of the forcing to hire out of this pool of carpenters that are inadequate necessarily to what we're looking for, but we have no choice otherwise. Because that's just the way the system's put in place. So there's obviously the systems, I think overall, the idea is good, but there's certain things and nuances that make it really challenging to operate it in a way that would be more efficient and probably get a better outcome.
And I think that a lot of that comes down to liability, where even with inspections and an inspector who comes through, and if there's a question as to where the liability will fall, the inspector will almost step back and be like, this is going to be on you guys, it's going to be an architect or an engineer, where in your situation, looking at the paperwork, ensuring the paperwork's on the up and up that's what they need to do. That's absolving them of that liability. And if there's no recourse for shoddy work, they're doing their job, and I don't agree with that at all. That, hey, people are qualified, so there's no inspections because they know what they're doing. I think that it should be both. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think that having systems in place and kind of levels of carpenters, I think that you need to take some of that and add inspections in, and create kind of a more difficult job market for people, where it's hey, what we do it's very hard. It's an art. It is legitimate living. We're a legitimate business. We offer, like we spoke about last week, Nick, benefits and healthcare and everything else. And then everyone is on a level playing field, because those people who are running illegitimate projects and jobs, like, while it may not concern you guys, I think that if people aren't educated and they see those numbers or they see those prices and then they think that that's the going rate, I think that's what kind of having to explain that is the difficult part.
Well, and a lot of them are just in the learning phase too. Is a lot of those companies, like if you look at the stats, like those companies are going to last 3 years and plummet because they didn't manage. They think they're making money, but 2 years down the road, they got $150,000, $200,000 in debt, and they can't do anything about it, and they shut down their company. So there are just technically a lot of those companies that are underbidding as well are just in the learning phase, and then there's a good chance they're going to plummet. I mean, we fortunately got out of that one. Like, we were in that trend in the first 3 years as well, but we pushed through. Like, that's a pretty standard sort of, if you're uneducated to the sense where you don't know business a lot, so you're just running in a circle that you might hit a hard stop too.
Yeah. So what are you guys doing as far as, like, if there's a project and there's no inspections, do you have like a quality inspection supervisor sign off where it's like, okay, yeah, we're good to go? Because obviously it's kind of the case here where at the end of the day, you're going to be responsible, but you don't have anyone coming in and being like, this past this past that, where you can go to your customers and be like, hey, we're on the up and up here.
Not exactly currently, but we are in the process of getting basically our wall system recognized by the Canadian, basically like our CMHC, or our entity for housing. So basically through this process, we're doing essentially a self-certification and having a quality check points basically throughout the whole prefabrication side of it, and then the whole assembly side of it as well.
Because I guess to go back to a little bit further there in terms of inspection, so when there's like a insurance program for new house construction in our province, so there is in that sense, when you're building a new house for like a single dwelling or condos, there is a specific insurance program that will monitor the contractors, because obviously the no inspections. So this insurance company does create a program with inspections, but again, it's a little bit loose because you get a certain rating after they've inspected 5 houses, and then okay, you're good to go.
Yeah.
So it's still not really a definite. It's still not inspections. It's just more liability that's added onto it.
And it's only for 4 years too, which is crazy. Like so people have it in, not everyone, obviously. These are the rare cases. People have it in mind that like they got to build for like 4 to 5 years, and then past that point, they're not responsible anymore, right?
I mean, even Nick, like with what you're doing, my jobs, typically we're running permitted jobs, and there's many reasons for that, but like, it's not just for my customer's peace of mind. It's also for my peace of mind to be like, hey, the township came through and they looked at this and signed off on this. We have an issue down the road. Like, yeah, there's still an issue, but it wasn't just me who didn't catch this. And that's kind of frightening, being that you guys are we're assuming responsibility and liability for that, but like, you guys are really assuming responsibility and liability for that.
I mean, everything falls on the general contractor 100%, like all liability basically. And like, as a general contractor in this province, it's like the scariest thing. You just like, everything becomes so that's why, again, we look at it like we're way above code into certain things, especially in the performance. And every house is verified by engineer for us, because we're outside of Part 9 in the code here in Canada. Part 9 being the residential sector, you can follow Part 9 and you can just build what's in the book. Or as soon as you add in like an LVL header or glulam or CLT, then you end up outside Part 9. So our whole project always is reviewed by an engineer, and the cost is minimal for us to have that additional protection and understanding.
So in regards to that, just because I want to ask that earlier, when you're handling most of the design, right? Or if not all of it, you're working with some architects.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're designing the panels?
Yep, exactly, yeah.
And you're ordering correct me if I'm wrong, you're ordering CLT panels, but are you ordering blanks, or are you ordering them fabricated to shop drawings?
Both. Depends on the project's complexity
and lead time, really.
And lead times. We do it all, but it's, for instance, I'm currently building my own house, and I ordered the whole thing from a company in Europe called Turl because of their machining capability. Like my whole house, it was like a numbered and labeled, and it was screwed together in 2 weeks. It was very complex. So it's like all my interior walls, everything. So it's like when you want to have that sort of nice complexity and finish, but then if you're just going for exterior walls, you're pretty much cutting out window openings and plugs. So, for lead times, just for us to be able to stay on top of things and keep a volume rolling, we do both.
So we'll talk about the finished panels in a minute. But so when you design them, everything goes to an engineer. So you must have partnered with an engineer that is, up to speed on mass timber.
100%.
And they're looking at your design and saying, move this, move that, make this span work like this. Yeah. And then stamping it, and that essentially resolves you of responsibility
for the structure to the most part, for the structural issues, but there's still like water management and everything else you got to consider, right?
Totally. I guess I'm speaking specifically to the structure, and because CLT is, they're in just for we're so far into this podcast, but if you don't already know what CLT is, they replace the entire system. There's no wall stud, there's no wall sheathing. It is one thick, if you can think of it as like a piece of engineered plywood that's plywood. 3+ inches thick. Yeah. And and to self promote, we did a couple videos on our YouTube channel that walk through the CLT panels, and you guys also have a YouTube channel. I have not checked it out. I don't know if you guys posted any of the CLT stuff, but that there's no floor joist. The floor system is a spanning cross-laminated timber panel, and that's it.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, when it comes to horizontal, this is like a little bit in terms of efficiencies for clients and trying to be on budget. Generally, where we say the most efficient place to use CLT is in a vertical position, because every other strand in your CLT is running in the opposite direction of your span. So you're buying the mass, you're buying CLT or buying any mass timber, and you're paying for the volume. It's typically a volume price. So if you're buying twice the amount of volume to achieve that span, then it becomes more of an aesthetic choice and it becomes more of a premium. So generally, and it also makes in some cases, it makes it more challenging to run mechanical.
But there is other mass timber products that do lend itself better to horizontal planes. So you have what's called
DLT.
So that's called we call DLT, which is dowel laminated timber, and it derived originally from NLT, which is nail laminated. You can basically think of it as basically a bunch of 2x4s or 2x6s on edge nailed together. But now the more modern day version of that is this essentially goes into a press. They'll take a big auger bit through the entire side of the panel, and they'll put a dowel through the whole thing, which basically binds all the pieces together. And then
it's a no glue system.
Yeah, and so usually you're using a softer wood like a spruce or fir for the mass of the member, and then using a harder wood in the dowel like a beech. And essentially, once the equilibrium happens between the moisture contents, and the dowel will swell and basically holds the entire panel together. It's really interesting.
See, that's the shit that it's so interesting because you just said it's a no glue system. Yeah. And it's like someone thought that, and it's like, okay, the natural reaction is going to allow the beech to expand and then hold this.
I'm pretty sure Festool dominoes are beech. And you don't necessarily need to glue them. And that's more so for lubrication. And obviously it swells them.
It's the same concept.
Yeah, they say just put a little bit of glue. Yeah. And because if anything, it's worse.
But hold on one sec. To go back. What about submittals for so you're not submitting anything to the township or whatever province or whatever? Or you are?
Oh yeah, 100%. That's we have two design technologists on our staff. So who have certification. So within our province, Quebec, we can stamp our own drawings from as a design technologist point of view. But we can't do commercial. So residential buildings and buildings up to 3,000 square feet, we can do everything in house. Beyond that, we're partnering with architects and working with other parties. And there's a lot of people that come to us with their design too. It's not like we're just strictly a design build, but it's, we're generally steering a lot of the design choices when they come to us, because there are some, like what I just explained in terms of the cost effectiveness of going to horizontal with the CLT. We have couple different systems in terms of a floor cassette, a roof cassette that we've designed similar to Benson Wood, I guess you could say, in terms of how they pre-insulate their their roof cassettes with the dense pack cellulose. and a floor cassette that we would use open web joists so we can run all our mechanical, because it's very challenging to run mechanical through a solid wood system. So, that's one of the biggest challenges, I think.
Bit of a hybrid, yeah.
That's for, we can get into some of the pricing in terms of our envelopes as well, but it's like, that envelope key component is, what we try to optimize. We're always trying to optimize in terms of performance and cost so that we can get to a market like, we're not just selling to the premium.
So when you guys go to submit for a project, or you're going to build a house, the township's getting, or we call them township anyway, I don't know what the heck you guys call them. Municipality is going to review that to ensure like lot coverage, setbacks, everything looks good on paper, and that's it. Like that's where it kind of ends at that point.
Depends which one you're applying to.
Yeah, they want engineering documents and sometimes engineer follow-ups. They want, there goes on and on.
The more rural, the more lenient.
In Ottawa, like
the cities they're much.
Well, yeah, and then they're doing inspections there. But I'm just saying for like where you guys are working, that the municipality's getting everything, making sure it all checks out on paper, everything's stamped off, and then they're like, all right, that's it.
Well, they'll come at the end of the project and make sure you have your handrail on. That's about it.
It's important.
And then you take it off for the photos. We all know how this works. So going back to the CLT panels used in horizontal application, that's what I found interesting in Switzerland, is that they were using the really nice CLT panels for flooring, and frankly, I think it's because how readily available it is over there,
and manufacturing,
but it's. The floor, one of the floor systems, I mean, you're absolutely right. The mechanical systems are very difficult to run, but they're typically suspending a ceiling below underneath, but on top, they have in one scenario, they had this like pea stone that had this like almost like Elmer's glue binder, Tyler, that they basically sprayed out of a hose and raked it around, and as you walked on it, it would basically just lock into place. And it was for sound, but before that they had, which I also found so interesting, is they used the blue, primarily blue, but we call it Smurf tube, but like wire loom, not split, like solid wire loom, and they would run to all their electrical locations, and then they would install that, and then they would pour a concrete slab on top of that. So now all the CLT is completely buried, and then they would go back, and all of their electrical, Tyler, ran through all this plastic tubing.
So they're pulling single wires?
No, I think it's multiple wires, but they run it. They pull all the wiring after through the Smurf tube. Yeah. And even all their plumbing, like all their water lines, are stapled to the floor, and they sleeve it in a wire loom. So when the concrete or anything cures around it, that plumbing can still move in. Yeah.
Well, I think even in an open cavity, they run that as well. Like,
they do, yeah.
I think by their code, it has to be in place.
Yeah.
So I did my house with a CLT floor just for the aesthetic. So my ceiling remains exposed, and I'm doing a raised floor for all my mechanicals. So, it comes down to a certain span, because the biggest span I have is around 14 feet. So at that point, you end up with, a certain,
it's still pretty decent. That's still a pretty decent span.
Or like, you're integrating a glue-am beam or something that's still aesthetic or something.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not that you can't do it, just more for, cost performance when we're looking to get our envelope down, and for ease for the construction. It's
I mean, it's just like anything else, right? Like if you're framing a house where it's like the least expensive way is going to be to put a beam under this, a post under this. You want to get rid of that and make it look as streamlined as possible. The cost is going to go up, and what goes into it is going to take more engineering and more cost.
Absolutely.
The Ardennes house, that roof system was CLT, right?
No, it was a truss system.
So it's a nano CLT, or it's called solid wood panels. So it's basically a 3/4 or 19 millimeter thick panel that we screwed on after the fact, after we built the utility cavity for that. And that has like shadow gaps around it, and it's like it's just a suspended ceiling. So
the shadow gap, guys, you got to go to their website. It's mchqc.ca. And look at the Ardennes house, because that shadow gap, I mean,
probably inspired by you anyways.
I want zero credit on that, because it's so good.
But that's kind of a way. Well, like, if you have a client which they really want that whole sort of Scandinavian solid wood look to it,
it's beautiful.
And Sometimes, we'll still have to do a framed wall, but we'll just apply a nano CLT after the fact, which is like a plywood, but we can get it, up to 40
So you
feet
probably
tall.
did something similar for like the interior
so it makes it look
walls
like a
or-
CLT wall, but it's actually just a standard frame wall.
Yeah. Okay. So that's probably how you handled some of the interior walls with electrical and interior doors.
There's I think in that house, there's probably 2 walls that are like that.
Cool.
Yeah, the rest of it is solid wood in that case, and we use the CLT as the door.
Yeah.
As well.
How much movement are you getting in these? I understand they're the grain is going in opposite directions, or everything moving it kind of as a whole.
Yeah, I mean that's what's nice about Karina is mentioning the cafe project and stuff. It's you get to go there every day and sort of see how things are progressing over time, and it's been 3-4 years and it's almost the same as the day we installed it. So it's very stable material. I mean, some products, and it depends on the manufacturer. So some products, they don't edge glue. And then if you're not edge gluing, then it's, much more of an industrial grade, and then you will get some separation over time as it dries and stuff. But so it depends on the manufacturer and whatnot, but generally we're using an exposed product and we're going with a higher grade product and always, sourcing it with
I mean, obviously there's less lumber volume with like a stick framed house, but one of the issues with stick framed homes are the plates, and like the plates shrinking more and moving more than the actual vertical studs and the rim joists and all of that stuff, where you're going to get a lot of the movement. So it's less mass there. But I'm sure that even though there's a lot more wood mass there, the way that it's kind of fabricated and made, it's not like a log home where you have this giant log that's one piece going in and then like shrinking an inch.
I think the Brock Commons building, just to give you some context, when they went up 18 stories, 18 stories, they didn't, this is not about it actually movement, but they didn't take into consideration the compression of all the weight going up. But they only, over 19 stories, I think they had 1 inch of compression. So, that's under compression. That's not under shrinkage. So, but in general, like, it's because it's engineered and they're held to pretty stringent standards in order to create this product. It's glued on, pretty much glued all around. So it's and dried accordingly. It comes right out of a kiln properly and goes straight into it being glued. So I think I've never really came across any movement issues. Definitely not, or shrinkage issues.
What was like the first kind of time that they started using this and implementing this? I'm sure that there was kind of one-offs
years ago, right?
But like
1997, I think
that's when it kind of took.
Yeah, there's an engineer, Austrian, and a German, I think.
it was the early 90s, and I think it was Austria area that it came about.
But it was 97, I think, the first production plant that came about.
And our first project was with a company called Merck from Germany, and they were the actual inventors and the first manufacturers of the product.
You just said something that I want to touch on, the compression. Mm-hmm. So this is just like a complete side story, but that's before I started my company, I was on a high-rise team, and to learn about that and understand it was wild. And I remember as we were building, like in Boston, there's a lot of hybrids. So you typically have a concrete core, but steel superstructure, and then concrete cast in place decks. And as we went up the survey, like I would always chat with the surveyors, and they would, every floor would be like a little too high, but it was by design because they would run the engineering, and I'm telling this just because I find it interesting. But they would run the engineering that once the building got loaded with precast windows, all of the concrete, all of the finishes, and everything else, they would expect the building to drop 6 inches.
Wow.
And I mean 6, like that's crazy. And there was at the time.
You get the last, floor. We're about to
all right,
drop
guys,
it.
put that in. All right, there it goes. All right, we're down.
Window.
But I can't.
Well, it's somewhat like log homes. Every wall connecting into a log has to be slotted for settling and whatnot.
Log homes are crazy because when they're new and you hit that, you fire up that wood stove the first night, you're gonna get some cracks. But there was a project in Boston at the same time that we were building, and that building went up, and I forget exactly what happened, but they loaded it with precast, and the building dropped it was over a foot. Wow. And they had to go back, and all the windows were in, and they had to go back and adjust. Like, it was, over 20 stories tall. Yeah. So when you think about it, it's, you're adjusting each floor less than a half inch.
Yeah.
But to think that a building drops or moves that much when you load it, it's a wild thing to consider. And like you said, you don't take into the fact that, 18 stories of lumber, that panel on the bottom or that post on the bottom, like there's a lot of goddamn weight.
Well, the other benefit to timber though is that it's light, right? Yeah. So that's a huge thing in the industry now. Is like when you're looking at certain areas that
it's the strongest material from like weight to structure like ratio.
Yeah. Ben, you a couple minutes ago, you looked at the notebook and said, we can talk about price. So I'm assuming that there's like my question that was not answered in DM is written down in that book. I didn't think we were going to talk about price. I reviewed
all of our projects for you to be able to answer your question.
That's amazing. I did not think we were going to talk about pricing. So I'm not even going to ask the questions.
We got to figure out the conversion rate.
I already did that too.
We better give her the stage then.
Because everyone's listening to this and like, this sounds great. Yeah, whatever. And we're pricing out. We have, I think, either 2 or 3 projects right now that are considering CLT. And I've talked to a couple manufacturers, and they're all like, listen, I'll price it, but I can tell you right now that out of the last 10 I've priced, they've come back and got rid of it because it was 20, 30% higher.
Yeah.
So give me the down low.
Explain
so basically when we meet with clients initially, before we go forward with anything, we'll send them like a Class D estimate for our building envelope. So we'll give them a range based on a square footage price. Like, we know there's so many variations and there's a lot of issues with providing square footage prices to people, but just to give people a context and a price point basically. And what we price, like what we give that range for, is an airtight building envelope. So we include a slab on grade foundation, our exterior wall systems, a floor package if it's a 2-story build, and then the roof system. And so with the cladding, without the cladding. Ready for
cladding, ready for roofing.
Exactly.
And the mechanical that's required underground or slab.
So, but again, if, like you were saying earlier, if you're choosing to keep the CLT exposed, it's essentially your interior finish already.
Yeah,
right?
Ready for
paint. So let me pause you there for 1 second. So there is if you are drywalling or plastering, you're going to be ordering a different grade CLT than if you want it to be finished, if you want the finished look on the inside. So there is that delta too to consider, right?
Yeah.
It's minimal, but it's not much different.
And you don't get like the savings.
It's more of a lead time issue is from what my understanding.
Yeah.
You can, yeah. In the end, it's going to cost you more to cover it up in the end.
Great.
So with that in mind, like it's the obviously between, we have a price range for a bungalow versus a 2-story, because as a 2-story, the price goes down. So for a bungalow, it's about $165 US per square foot. So you'd be in a range of like $150 to $175 US per square foot for a bungalow. And for a 2-story, it's about $125 to $155 a square foot.
And just for everyone listening, the reason 2-story drops is because you're not doing another foundation or another roof for the square footage that you're gaining.
You're getting a stack effect.
Yeah, the stack effect. So the floor package is typically a lot less expensive than your roof package. So then that price gets spread out over more.
And keep in mind, and that's including windows, right?
And
that's including windows.
High performance,
triple pane, high performance.
passive
windows.
Certified. And
so that is your shell.
Yeah.
Airtight, weathertight shell.
Low passive airtightness, passive certified windows. Your
that's
200 millimeters of wood fiberboard insulation, continuous on the exterior.
So comparing it to the passive number 2, the 15, where you're trying to get under the 15 kilowatt hour per square meter annually. Our houses typically fall, because in our province, hydro is really cheap. We give it to you guys for a lot more money. So our cost of hydro is really cheap. So it's really hard there's no payback for us to add that extra 30, 40 grand of insulation on our buildings. Mm-hmm. So we're typically falling around that 30 to 35 kilowatts per cubic meter, per square meter annually, rather than that going down to that 15. Just the pay. I mean, obviously it would make a lot of sense, but it goes back to choice of materials and where you're getting your hydro from, what grid you're getting from, because you can build a passive house that's really bad for the environment, based on materials you choose. You can build, like, for instance, a bone structure that is polyurethane, that is passive, that is like, is all, that is on a really clean grid, could have would never get a payback in terms of an environmental impact from the initial construction build. So if that same building was on a grid that was, who knows, charcoal, or not charcoal, but coal, you'd end up with, you might over time get the environmental return back. So there's so many different things when you're starting to talk environmental impact and everything else, but it all comes down to really the choice of material that you're using. So we use foam below grade because that makes sense. We use like a type 2 EPS. Other than that, we're pretty much full wood structure above. So we got a CLT, plus that we have our wood fiber board as our insulation, and then we use the dense pack cellulose for typically our roof cassettes. Or if we're going a little bit more Scandinavian, we'll basically add CLT and wood fiber board again on our roof. So we're really minimizing the amount of petroleum products we're putting into our building.
Basically a wood based.
So what insulation rating are you guys getting typically in like walls?
About R4 per inch.
Yeah, so it'll vary. So we end up with, we do have, like Arden House, for instance, we're going to go in millimeters, but it would be, we ended up at 250 millimeters versus our standard 200 millimeters. So that would be, let's say,
around 10 inches.
10 inches. No, it would be
9.8 inches. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, of insulation. But we've done mine. My personal house, I went up to 290 millimeters, so that we ended up with just because my area volume ratio was really off because of I was building off an existing foundation. I wanted to get to passive or even close, but I got to a low energy standard at 25 with my building. But that's, so we're looking at, so that's just a bit of more context of what the products we're using and what we're trying to.
It's an R40 wall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's R3.5. It's similar to EPS, and you're not including the CLT. Like generally, you have it is like our averages around 120 mils for the CLT as well. So you got to add a little bit of a value there too. But so it's really in terms of it comes down to we're not necessarily building passive house. We like to say we try to use passive systems. Like I don't know if you went to that YouTube series where we're talking in Arden, where we bring in we acclimatize our HRV system by coming underground and preheating and pre-cooling depending on the season. So we can get and that's just a simple investment of putting a tube underground, and then you have free heat. So that we take advantage of any type of passive system that you can do. And we shop for our clients. We're trying to find that balance because there's always, there's a budget, and then there's what they want. And then the issue is we're always trying to sell quality over quantity. So we're always scaling back the size. They come to us with a size that we'll design it way smaller because we know we're going to end up a little bit bigger. And then we try to find a place in the middle. So.
Did you say what typically are you feeling is kind of your multiplier versus like a traditionally framed house? Did you say that in the beginning of the podcast, or am I just dreaming that up? I feel like they told me three times.
I said it was a really expensive framing if you're just using CLT without premium manufacturing is what I was trying to lay context there. But I think
we don't have that context. We haven't built like a stick frame standard home in so long, so I don't know what to compare it to anymore.
Yeah, so I mean, a 3,500 square foot house is a big house. There's bigger, there's smaller, but if you're looking at like $125 a square foot, it's $437,000 for your frame, installation, window, strut, foundation package. It's definitely that's going to be on a higher side, but it's not like it's crazy out of the ballpark for what you're getting. And again, that comes down to what you're looking to sell.
Because it's not apples to apples, though.
That's what I mean. You're comparing apples to oranges in a sense. Like, because like a stick frame, like what we're providing is, we're going to include a high performance HRV system as well. So you're getting this really healthy, long lasting home. Our envelope, I always use that analogy of a barn. A barn will stand, for hundreds of years if the roof stays intact. Our system breathes properly, and it's a full wood structure. So we're not looking at a frame system that's going to get infiltration of and trap moisture in and rot and mold over time, where we're going to live in it anyways, but we're just going to live in a really unhealthy environment.
Right.
But this system has a full drying potential, and it has a very longevity. We always say it's a 150 year envelope. I mean, we'll see. We probably won't, but essentially it's it has a really long lifespan compared to a lot of stuff that's getting.
Yeah, and again, that's also that's your roof, your insulation, your foundation, your frame. So it's not just a framing number, where you're like, you could frame that house for $50,000. It's not just a framing number there.
And it can be your interior finish as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's the high performance measure of the airtightness, the quality of life within that. The windows is something that is really challenging not challenging, but you really have to educate your client on, because like, well, why would I spend $80,000 on my windows? It's like, it's like the key area to get your house comfortable and just, and feel comfortable within it. The whole analogy of using a triple pane versus a double pane, you can sit in front of a triple pane window and have zero sort of draft. As soon as you go to a double pane, you can have, I don't know if everyone's explained this, but a triple pane, you're never going to get more than 2 degrees different between the ambient air within the building and the pane inside. But as soon as you go to double pane, you can have up to 11 degrees difference. So even if there's no air infiltrating, the cold air on that double pane is just basically dropping to the floor and creating this convection effect in front of it. Mm-hmm. So you get, you can be anywhere within your house and you can feel the air stable and
as a mammal, you have, tens of thousands of sensory
podcast stat.
And so as just a biological,
as a mammal,
any biological creature is what I meant to say. You have tens of thousands of sensories experience all over your skin. So the primary sort of dominant experience of when you actually are inhabiting a space, which is like a shelter or structure, is surface temperature. So you're getting about 70% of the experience is surface temperature, and then about anywhere from 20 to 30 is air and air movement. So, when you're looking at that in terms of like a glass is always going to have a colder or warmer, depending on the season, surface temperature. So, if you're building these glass boxes, that's why it's maybe look nice on a photo or something, but when you're actually inhabiting the space, it doesn't give any sort of sense of comfort or shelter. So, and that going back to that point, that's if there's designers or architects listening, that is actually a good ratio for your window to wall rate. Is about anywhere from 30 to 40% should be glass.
Do you know what we need to do, Nick, and have somebody sponsor?
Build CLT houses.
Well, no, just like small models of each, where it's like, here's a standard stick-built house, fiberglass insulation, like no crazy insulation details with windows, and then something like this, and just have like a small electric heater in there and walk in and just feel what the difference would be.
So that's, Sega's factory has that. They have a box that they built wrapped, and they had a tiny little heater in
Never mind.
So you could turn it on and see how fast it heats up. But hold on. Another story about that is, speaking of triple pane, because it reflects, like you said, it reflects the heat back into the home. Mm-hmm. There was I want to say it was my professor for construction tech in college, and he told the story that they were building a house, all triple pane windows, that mechanical system was not turned on yet. And he had walked in, and his painter was in the living room sweating his ass off. He goes, "Why are you so hot?" He goes, "I don't know. I think someone's got the heat on." And it was his body temperature bouncing off the window and heating up the room he was in to the point where he was sweating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have that with our subtrades all the time.
Like, we have pretty cold winters up here. It goes to it doesn't convert, minus 30 Celsius. So I don't know what that is.
Sounds so cold.
A
little above freezing.
Minus 30.
Yeah. And, the building envelope's up and no heating and everything like that.
That's negative 22.
It's comfortable.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we have subtrades come in and think that the heat's on or something like that. When not necessarily in the midwinter, but like in that shoulder season when there's not even power hooked up to the building yet, and you end up with that sort of reaction. We get that quite often.
It's similar to, like, you talk about passive heating, right? And I think it was one of the episodes of Grand Design. And this guy built a house this enormous glass window, but in the center of the house, he poured this cast-in-place concrete wall. And, you know, in the winter, the sun was low enough that it would blast through the glass and heat that concrete up enough to heat his whole house.
Yeah,
It would radiate the heat throughout the whole
There's this
thing.
one in Spain I was looking at, and essentially it's like a brick wall mass, and there's a window directly in front of it, so it's only a couple inches air gap, and they paint it black. And essentially, exactly that. The sun comes in, heats up this whole brick mass, and then it, you know, distributes the heat through the colder of the evening. Pretty interesting.
Oh, God.
Jake, can you explain to me how Celsius works as far as like the gradient and the scale of that? Because I'm just looking up different numbers real quickly, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
It's not a direct.
I know it's
one
like
you'll never figure out.
It's like a scale, but I'm like, all right, 0 is 32 and minus 30 is minus 22. How does that make any sense?
Wild.
Yeah, that's why I can never, like, because we deal with Celsius. Whenever I go to Fahrenheit, I'm so confused. There's no
And then, you know, in mechanical, you use BTUs, which is British thermal unit, right? And then so it's like nothing ever translates. It's really weird.
I think it's foolish that we use feet and inches in Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
Completely foolish.
Yeah. I mean, metric is so much better when you start using it. It's just
Multiples of
Simple
10,
Yeah, there's
100
no
degrees is
conversions
boiling,
and
0 is
fractions.
freezing. It's goodness.
well, for sure. And then, but no, it's definitely. We have a lot of fun with what we're doing, so it's you know, we came a long way, and you know, we're happy with our simple wall system that we've created from our, you know, those two materials that we now use, and we're still got a long way to go. We're into you know, we're really pushing towards the manufacturing of CLT in the next coming years as well. So we just bought 12 acres along with you know, that 10,000 square foot building. So we're working towards becoming a supplier of mass timber in, you know, in our area.
So we go right from a tree, basically, essentially, to a finished house product on the one site.
And fiber to finish are going to be our goal in the coming years. So
You guys are incredibly humble, but you should be proud. Like, and I mean that honestly. Like, you guys are so humble and just like everything that you like, walking across two countries. Like, yeah, we just walked across two countries. Ran, yeah, no big deal. I broke my hip, but it's okay. You know, but I in 10 years, like Tyler said in the very beginning, I mean, it's impressive. And, you know, I'm glad that you forced me to have you on the podcast. But it's so cool. And, you know, obviously it's something that I'm interested in, and being, you know, having this conversation and seeing it firsthand in Switzerland. They just built a mid-rise in Boston with mass timber that I'm supposed to tour in 3 weeks. And it's just to see this evolve and see construction start really taking, you know, the right turns is really encouraging.
It's such an exciting time in this industry. Like, there's so many cool projects, and you know, and North America is really adopting well, and it's very exciting to see it happen. Yeah, like, because we've been at this for a while, and it was hard, but now, you know, that sort of critical mass point, it feels that it's reached it. You know.
Well, guys, I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah, we got to get the other three on. You know, just put them behind you, like stadium seating.
It's like the true story.
Yeah, our dad used to joke about building like a music band. We cannot sing for the life of us at all. It would be horrible, but
a lot of those singers can't sing. They get that auto tune and they're good.
yeah, true.
You guys could have been like the Canadian Jacksons.
that would be the Rankin family already.
Yeah.
They already exist.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for having us on. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Kind of cool to talk to you guys in person. Too.
For sure. No,
You ever coming north?
it was great. I feel like typically we get to the 2-hour mark and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to wrap. We'll definitely have to have you guys back on. I don't say that a lot because normally, you know, 2 hours of talking to somebody, I'm like, that was enough talking to somebody. But I feel like we could definitely get into more. I'm finally like at the point where I'm like, okay, I get what they do now.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we'd love to back on, and
Give us a
definitely
year.
there was a lot of things that we could definitely go into further depth on. for sure.
Yeah, and thanks so much for the podcast. Like, there's been a lot of times where we definitely feel like we're a bit crazy and
or alone in what we do.
That whole alone thing, like we're the only ones going through it. But it's great. It's obviously great to have the podcast and listen and see that it's industry wide.
Yeah, your mission of education and everything too that you guys are moving towards. It's like it's respectable. We definitely. Any way we can help without any documentation or think we can help out that way, we'd be happy to be on board. If you want to reference what's going on up here, we can share whatever. And
that's massively appreciated, and we will absolutely take you up on that.
Yeah, appreciate it for sure.
And so I think, it's been great talking to you guys, and I hope it don't be the end. So we'll definitely
we'll keep listening. That's for sure.
Here's to America's hat. Finally.
Dude, that conversation was cool.
Yeah, I
like everything from family to homeschool to what they're building. It's super freaking cool.
Yeah, I feel like we could it's an interesting dynamic having three people on. It worked well today because they all, like, I feel like a lot of times you have more than one person on and one person does all the talking and then sets somebody else up and they're either not paying attention. But they did a good job. Everyone was engaged. They all had a different viewpoint. You could see they all had kind of their different things within the business that they like to talk about. But we could definitely have them back on.
All right, guys. Well, we got a ton of feedback, Tyler, and I know you did as well, about our one-on-one conversations as well. So, guys, we're definitely gonna be dumping a few more of those conversations and digging into like one specific topic and just having a powwow between Tyler and I in future episodes. So we'll dig into that. We do have some swag to give away, and I'm gonna go for the Schiffer Grace 2024. Comment. It says, I've been a listen. I'm definitely not running for president or vice president for that matter. Have been a listener for years now and followed Nick and Tyler on socials. Much respect for the content these fellows are putting out. Being a solo carpenter new to the business side, I learned something new on each episode. Also love the down-to-earth take on different topics. You clearly don't compromise in your business endeavors, and that shows through growing the podcast as well. Top-notch stuff, very transparent. The Bow Built Company. So the Bow Built, shoot us a DM on Instagram and let us know your address and your size, and we'll get some swag out to you. If you guys want some swag, you can head over to our Instagram account and click the link. Otherwise, you can leave a comment on iTunes letting us know how we're doing, and we'll pick someone at random. And until then, we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, so sorry. I know you just said see you next week, but you were
That's okay.
Our conversations one-on-one, Nick and I had kind of spoken off, I want to say off screen, off air, about those topics. And I think, we're going to dig into some topics if there's specific things that you want, and then maybe try and generate a little bit more content based on what you guys want to focus on. So if you want to kind of mention us, shoot us an email, just like very concise what you'd like to hear something about, and then we'll dig into that and kind of figure out a few different topics that can kind of revolve around that to dig into.
Now we'll see you next week. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, either one. Maybe we'll see them.